Brown vs. the Board of Education by Delaney Paul. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Martin Luther King, Jr. Throughout history, African Americans have faced many challenges. Although the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, African Americans were still heavily discriminated against. Jim Crow laws were state laws that were passed in 1876 and mandated that blacks and whites be separated in all forms of life. These laws led to a huge social demise between blacks and whites. Racial segregation was primarily practiced in the South. There were separate bathrooms, schools, churches, restaurants, water fountains, and many other common things that were separated for blacks and whites. It was also apparent that the black facilities were of less regard. The buildings and other black facilities were not nearly as nice as the white ones were. In 1896, the court ruling of Plessy v. Ferguson made racial segregation legal. The idea of separate but equal was promoted everywhere. However, although separate, blacks and whites were nowhere near equal. Blacks were considered inferior to the white race. The white population was extremely racist towards blacks and would go to extreme lengths to persecute them. In Topeka, Kansas, a black third grader named Linda Brown had to attend a school 21 blocks away from her home, as opposed to the 5-block distance all-white school. Linda's father, Oliver Brown, did not like that Linda had to walk so far to her school and decided to fight this notion. In 1951, Brown sued the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. The plaintiffs were 13 Topeka parents on behalf of their 20 children. Brown was not the first to ever challenge these ideals of keeping blacks and whites separate. There were several other court cases that had tried. Some were successful, such as Murray v. Maryland, Missouri X-Rail Gaines v. Canada, Sweat v. Painter, and many more. Although these cases had some significance, they did not have the power to overturn the Plessy decision. The U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas heard Brown's case from June 25 to June 26, 1951. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, which helped this court case gain momentum, claimed that segregated schools made black children feel inferior to whites. They argued that blacks and whites were not equal. The Board of Education said that segregated schools prepared black children for the segregation they would face during the rest of their life. They also argued that discrimination by race did no harm to children. Although the judges agreed that black children might feel inferior, they could not overthrow the precedent set by the ruling of Plessy v. Ferguson. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the Board of Education. However, on October 1, 1951, the NAACP and Brown appealed to the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall, who was the NAACP's chief counsel, led this revolution and argued before the court. Thurgood Marshall would later become the first black justice on the Supreme Court. This case, along with Davis v. County School Board of Prince Edward County, Belton v. Gebhard, Briggs v. Elliott, and Bowling v. Sharp, combined under one name: Brown v. Board of Education. Before Brown v. Board of Education, it was extremely common for schools to be segregated. The North was the only place where it was forbidden. On the map, the red indicates where it was required for schools to be segregated. The yellow indicates where there was no legislation. Blue indicates where it was optional, and green was where it was forbidden. On December 9, 1952, the Supreme Court first heard Brown v. Board of Education, but was unsuccessful in coming to a unified decision. In 1953, Chief Justice Fred Vinson died suddenly, and President Eisenhower replaced him with Earl Warren. A year later, the court reconvened and came to the conclusion that they must first decide whether or not the 14th Amendment was being violated or not. Finally, on May 17, 1954, Chief Justice Earl Warren read the decision of the court. The court asked themselves this question: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities. Ultimately, their answer was unanimously yes. The court finally ruled in the favor of Brown after years of fighting for this issue. The court's ruling stated that the racial segregation in schools violated the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. This landmark decision changed America in three major ways. It desegregated schools, kicked off the civil rights movement, and changed the way courts make decisions today. Brown v. Board of Education is one of the most easily known and also one of the most important court cases in American history. For the first time in history, black and white children attended schools together. This changed America because it was the first step to integrating the two races as a whole. However, white parents did not like their children going to school with blacks and would often protest outside the school. Although many schools delayed their integration, majority of the schools became integrated and took huge leaps into making black and white children feel equal at school. The decision of Brown v. Board of Education was a crucial point in history for the field of education and for children. However, it took a long time for the schools to reach a point of peace. One of the most important roles the Brown v. Board of Education decision played in the history of America was that it helped to jumpstart the 1955 Civil Rights Movement. Since the Brown decision did not desegregate public areas and other such things, the Civil Rights Movement began to challenge these laws. The Brown decision served not only as a model but also as an inspiration for the black population. It gave them hope that they will be treated equally. Rosa Parks became an inspirational icon for refusing to move on a bus. The decision of the court provided optimism that if the court ruled in their favor for the desegregating of schools, then they would also desegregate all other forms of life as well. The aftermath of Brown v. Board of Education stimulated a lot of civil rights movements. One of the most famous and historic civil rights leaders of all time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., chose the anniversary of the decision of Brown v. Board of Education in 1962 to launch the Gandhi Society for Human Rights. Martin Luther King Jr. admired and spoke with great regard for the importance Brown v. Board had on the civil rights movement. The decision of Brown v. Board also changed the way courts make their decisions today. The Supreme Court adapted the basis of the Constitution in order to address new issues that had been raised. The Supreme Court stepped away from the legal tradition and also relied heavily on the social aspects of the case. This had not been a common practice in the 1950s, which proves what a milestone and momentous court case Brown v. Board really was. Brown v. Board of Education was a special case because it overturned Plessy v. Ferguson. The court also used evidence from a study by two educational psychologists, Kenneth and Mamie Clark. The study was performed on children as young as 3 and up to 10. They showed children a white and a black doll and asked which one they wanted to play with or thought was better. All the children chose the white dolls. This study was used in the case to show the inequality of a separate educational system based on race. This was another rare practice used in the court case to help make the decision. The Brown v. Board of Education was split up into two parts: constitutionality of the issue and implementation of the issue. The implementation of Brown v. Board became known as Brown II. The purpose of Brown II was to decide what will be used to implement the principles decided in the original case. Chief Justice Warren insisted localities to act on the new principles and to move with all deliberate speed. However, many people did not like the choice of language Warren used. Supporters of the case believed it to be too vague and allowed many schools to delay their integration. Some schools refused to integrate their school and were ultimately shut down after not complying, though. The breakthrough decision of Brown v. Board of Education was one of the most important court cases in American history and forever changed America as well. It integrated black and white children, kicked off the civil rights movement, which pushed for more equality beyond the schools, and also changed the way courts make decisions. Although racism and inequality still ensued after the Brown v. Board decision, the court case still remained a vital step to fully integrating and combining the black and white races. Brown v. Board of Education is a decision that will be held to high regards for its victory and importance with the civil rights movement.